Welcome to Discovering. The UP is full of great excuses to get outdoors, and there's no shortage of places to do it. We'll take a look at Grand Island.
So if you're looking for something interesting to do in the UP, you might consider a trip to Grand Island National Recreation Area.
It's all tonight, so stick around. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
We're lucky here in the UP, and the fact that we never really have to travel far to find remoteness and seclusion. It's never really any further than a few minutes away by car, or in this case, by boat. Located a half-mile offshore from Munising is 13,500 acres of Lake Superior woodland, known as Grand Island. Grand Island is part of the Hiawatha National Forest, and its geology is an extension of the adjacent Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. It's a great place for hiking, mountain biking, camping, hunting, fishing, or just to get away for a day. In 1990, Grand Island was elevated to the status of National Recreation Area by Congress after the U.S. Forest Service purchased the island from its former owner, Cleveland Cliffs Iron Company. This year marked the 25th anniversary of this designation, and a special day was created known as Grand Island Day.
Well, Grand Island Day is an exciting anniversary celebration for the U.S. Forest Service. Grand Island was designated a National Recreation Area in 1990, so 2015 is our 25th anniversary of Grand Island being public land. It's a great opportunity for folks to come over and enjoy the island for the day. We have free ferry service today and free bus tour shuttles. So folks are going around to the island to the various stopping points, stopping at historic sites, beaches, cliffs, and visiting there with Forest Service staff who are providing programs, special programs about bears, about historic sites, about archaeology, Native American stories on the island. We're even doing a program about native plant restoration projects that have happened on the island, talking about geology. So there's a wide range of topics. Visitors are enjoying the opportunity to hop on the shuttles and check out these beautiful sites. The scenery on the island is beautiful. There is quite a range of scenery from forest, deep forest trails to lots of shoreline areas, including some beautiful beaches where we have campsites, day use areas. Some folks like to come to the island to enjoy it from the water with their personal boats or kayaks, sea kayaks, or even pontoons. There's even a rental for pontoons in town nearby, and folks rent and come over and enjoy the day.
Over time, Lake Superior has done its best in shaping and reshaping Grand Island. Part of that transformation includes the creation of a Tombolo.
Grand Island used to be 3 separate islands. There was a smaller island closer to Sandpoint, Munising, Michigan, and then there was an island in the middle, and then an island off to the northwest. and probably closer to 5,000 years ago. The Tombolo was formed because Lake Superior is pushing all the sediment up on the shores, and since there were these narrow channels in between each island, there was a narrow place for all of the sand to keep getting pushed up into. That's what forms the Tombolo. Well, pictured rocks is not just one rock layer. It's actually multiple layers of sedimentary rock. And so the way sedimentary rock forms is not through heat, but it's just pressure, and layers of sediment keep falling on top of each other. And that pressure just keeps compacting it into rock. And around here we have a bunch of sandstone. And so our first layer, which is makes up most of the cliffs of Grand Island, is the Jacobsville sandstone. And it's made up of this really iron-rich red sandstone, which is really neat. And it also had some white sandstone in there as well. It was really popular for building chimneys and stone cottages because it was just a very pretty stone. And then there's another layer on top of that called the basal conglomerate layer. And that's formed of a bunch of different shapes and sizes of rocks. And in between those two layers, there's something called unconformity, which is a gap in geological time. Complete layer is just knocked off, and that's because this used to be a shallow sea, and the waters were so rough that they eroded away the top layer of the Jacobsville sandstone and formed this mixture of all these different types and shapes of rocks. On top of that, you have your Chapel Rock sandstone layer. That's going to consist of a lot of garnet and feldspar, and it's our strongest layer of sandstone that we have on the cliffs. So when you look out and you see the undercuts, the top layer that's still there is going to be that Chapel Rock sandstone. And then your last layer that you have is the Miner's Castle sandstone layer. It is more of a clay-based sandstone, and so it's very weak, very crumbly, and so you see a lot more erosion of that rock along the lakeshore. And that's where you're going to get your copper color coming out, so your greens, your blues, yellows, and reds, and that's where the majority of the actual pictured rocks, National Lakeshore rocks, are going to come from.
So the island is about 13,500 acres. So rather large. It stretches about 8 miles from its bottom end to its north end, and about 4 miles wide. So it's quite a long island, and it takes a while to get from one end to the other. But we do have trails that run around the entire rim of the main island. That loop is about 26 miles. So perfect for a marathon, and there is one here every July. Day hiking on the island is certainly a great way to spend maybe half a day, planning 4 to 6 hours depending on what your goals are. But there's a nice loop that you can take around the southern end of the island, walking from the landing where you will land on the ferry. You can walk up to some historic buildings where we have interpretive exhibits. People can learn about the sites. You could walk on to Murray Bay Beach and maybe up to Trout Bay Beach. And then if you're hiking, you can hike straight back, retracing your steps back to the landing. So that's a nice little loop. So we have some hiking only trails on the island, but we also have a good number of dual use trails that are for hiking and mountain biking. Some of those routes travel over roads as well, so they're actually gravel. So for a person planning to mountain bike on the island, we do recommend that you bring a mountain bike. First of all, touring bike's really not appropriate here based on the surface. There's a variety of options to look at. You can plan a fairly simple route that stays on the gravel roads, or you can get a little more adventurous and take the dual use trails, and those tend to there be a native surface. Some of them are fairly smooth and flat, but then as you get onto the north end of the island, they get a little bit rougher and bumpier. For the mountain biking enthusiasts, they love it. You'll be going uphill and downhill as you make your way to the north end of the island. Real treats at the north end of the island include several beautiful overlooks on top of the cliffs. So you're a couple hundred feet above the water. You can see the rocks. You can see the water below you. It's gorgeous. There are a range of camping options on Grand Island. First of all, we have several campsites that are for small groups. And those campsites are in nice locations near the water. Murray Bay would be an example where we have campsites that you can enjoy. You can even walk there easily from the landing, just a couple miles to get there. Another option is group campsites. We have several group campsites on the island that are good options for folks who have a larger group and want to plan ahead to be on the island. Another option is for folks kayaking. We have a couple of campsites that were designed specifically for water access. So those are not easy to get to on foot, some of them, but you can easily reach them with your kayak or your boat. And then lastly, we actually have a rental cabin on the island that can also be reserved. So that's another nice option. To look at what's reservable, you can go on to recreation.gov and check out the Grand Island rentals there. Mather Lodge is a really neat historic building on the island. It's an old building built in the early 1900s by William G. Mather, who was the owner of Cleveland Cliffs Incorporated in the early days of mining in the UP. William Mather had a vision of Grand Island as a wild game farm. So one of the things he did was build a lodge on the west side that was for his use and his, some of his guests. Beautiful historic building, lodge built out of logs, hemlock harvested right here on the island.
We had just finished a historic restoration project. It was 4 weeks long here at the Mather Clower Lodge. It was funded with a couple different sources of money, of course the Forest Service, as well as some private donors. The Mather Foundation and the Clower family have also helped with restoration efforts with the lodge, and we've worked through our partner, Illinois State University, who does the fundraising for us. We've had a partnership with Illinois State University since 2001. We've ran and started the Grand Island Archaeological Project. This is an archaeological field school that we cooperatively work with the university on, and the professor is Dr. James Skibo. He's actually a native of Crystal Falls and a graduate of Northern Michigan University. We've been running a field school out here for the last 15 years now, trying to better understand all the different eras of occupation on Grand Island, starting from the oldest recorded site. The oldest recorded occupation that we know about so far is about 4,200 years old. And we've excavated sites that old on up through the Mather era itself. So the early, what we call the resort era, which would be when Cleveland Cliffs Iron Company first purchased the island. Behind me is the Mather Lodge. This was his personal home, residence, hunting lodge, you could say. Didn't live in it year round, but certainly visited the site throughout the year. It was where he entertained guests, as well as the beginning of the game preserve. At the north side of this structure is an old stockade fence that runs east-west across the island. North of there was where he stocked exotic game such as moose, caribou, elk, albino deer, and such. Then to the south end of the island is where they had the resort. So we refer to it as the resort era. Where I'm standing now and going back several hundred feet is about 4,000 years of occupation. The Lake Nipissing High Lake phase about 4,000 years ago was several hundred feet back in the woods, and we've excavated sites that are associated with that old Nipissing shoreline all the way up to where I'm standing right now at the modern edge of the bluff above the shore. We've mainly done this to try to analyze change over time, and in those areas we've seen the transition to pottery on the island. We've also seen transitions in the types of stone tools or the raw material that they use to make stone tools. The earliest occupants relied heavily upon the quartzite cobbles, which you find on the beach here itself. But about the time of pottery, we see a shift. This is around 2,000 years ago. We see a shift to chert. The chert that was brought to this island was actually traded for. We have evidence of chert originating from south of Charlevoix, Michigan, called Norwood chert, as well as the Saginaw Bay area called Bayport chert, all the way coming up here to Grand Island. So prior to the intervention of the internet, they had trade networks that moved this material all around the Great Lakes. We've also excavated some of the early logging ventures on the island, and this is just a great place for us to try to interpret the island's history. So just to demonstrate, I'm using a set of modern day tools here. These are obviously not too old. These are machined aluminum with copper heads on them. But what was used prehistorically or prior to European contact was deer antler. All right. So this is a tool that I use to make the notches in the base of an arrow point. So I'm just going to do a basic demonstration showing some of the initial steps. Usually we start with a chunk like this. And using a hammerstone, start producing flakes that could be used for tools themselves. In fact, the most common tool we find archaeologically are just simply sharp flakes like this that were used for cutting and slicing and filleting. But the process is essentially one of reducing this cobble of chert by thinning both planes, trying to knock flakes like this off. What I'm trying to do is reduce these two planes, this side and this side, to make it as thin as possible so that I can work it into something more like a preform. And this is what would have been traded. Archaeologically, we find these. We sometimes find caches of these that have been set aside. They aren't finished products, but they would have been traded so that the person who acquired this could actually make it into the shape that they wanted. And that was typically done through a technique called pressure flaking. And I'll demonstrate that here real fast. Using a pressure flaker tool, this is a copper tip pressure flaker tool, but also using the tip of a deer antler. And it's just a process of, instead of hitting, I'm actually pushing flakes off. So it's just producing very tiny little flakes that kind of whittle away the edge and allow me to shape it into the type of point I want, as well as the type of hafting element where the notches are. That would have been what was used to tie the actual stone tool to the arrow shaft or spear shaft. When I think about it, I'm sort of creating an archaeological site just by demonstrating this process. So if I were to step away from where I've been making these stone tools and remove everything that typically would rot, what you're left with, the tools are what we typically find archaeologically, which is the core piece that the flakes were driven off of. Sometimes you'll find flakes that were utilized and then thrown away, as well as the hammer stones that were used to grind the edges and to knock flakes off the raw material itself. This is typically what we find. Of course, on Grand Island it's different materials, but the concept's the same.
Very close to the landing, the closest beach to the landing, is going to be the Murray Bay Beach. Very nice little beach, south-facing, looking over Murray Bay. And in that beach is real nice for day use. Tends to be tucked in from the wind. There's a nice day use site there with picnic tables and a grill, so you could come over and grill and enjoy the day. If you do come and enjoy the day use area, that's wonderful, but make sure that you keep your picnic basket and all of your scented materials with you. Just bring it in, do your eating, and take it back with you. We do have concerns with bears on the island, and we really want to make sure that we don't teach them bad habits. Trout Bay Beach is beautiful. It's about a mile wide, running east to west between the main island and the thumb of the island. It's a beautiful sand beach, really, smooth, white sand, lovely. And folks love to go sit on that beach and look north and enjoy the quiet. Being an undeveloped beach, it doesn't get a lot of use, and it tends to be a really nice place for a quiet afternoon. Another nice thing about Trout Bay Beach is because it's tucked in between the thumb of the island and the main body of the island, is that you've got beautiful rocks running up north from both ends of the beach. So beautiful views of the cliffs as they climb toward the north end of the island. Well, that sandstone is just gorgeous. Kayaking is a great way to enjoy Grand Island. A lot of folks, if you're brand new to kayaking, will enjoy the calmer waters that Grand Island affords, blocking the north wind. A couple of really important safety pointers though. When kayaking on the Great Lakes, particularly on Lake Superior where the water is very cold year-round, it is really important to think safety first. First pointer is to make sure that you use a sea kayak. So not a little squirt boat. You're going to need the stability of a bigger boat. Secondly, make sure you have your life jacket and all of your safety equipment with you. Even if it's a beautiful day when you set out, make sure you have clothing for high winds. Make sure you plan on getting wet and you know how to get back into your kayak. Hypothermia happens very quickly in the water here, so it's important to be ready for that. It's also important to remember that on Lake Superior, the wind can shift unexpectedly, and when that wind shifts, the waves grow quickly, and much of the island is surrounded by cliffs, so you could find yourself 5 miles from any place to get out of the water, just up against cliffs. And so you need to be a proficient paddler, and you need to plan your day. You need to keep repeatedly checking the weather so you know what's going on. The ferry service runs about from Memorial Day through early October, and the ferry times vary a little bit throughout the season, but during high summer season they're running from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. on the hour, except there's no 1 o'clock. So they run 9, 10, 11, 12, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The ferry service is located at the landing on the mainland side, so you just buy your ticket there. You can even rent a bike there at the landing. Bring the family over. It's really nice to have that shuttle service to be able to go back and forth and not have to use your own boat. There are no concession stands or stores on the island at this time, so bring with you what you need. Bring your bug dope, any medications you might need. Bring a change of clothes and layers so that if the weather changes, which of course it often does off Lake Superior, you're ready for that change.
Well, that's it for tonight. If you'd like to keep tabs on what's coming up on Discovering or see where we've been, you can join us on Facebook or go to 906outdoors.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Discovering.